All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about one of the most critical, most dangerous spots on the entire planet. It's just this tiny stretch of water, but believe me, it has an iron grip on the whole global economy. 20%. That's the number I want you to hold in your head for a second. Just 20%. Sounds simple, right? But what could it possibly represent that's so important? Well, that's the percentage of the entire world's oil supply that has to squeeze through one single narrow waterway. A disruption here? Oh, that's not just some local issue. It's a global crisis in the making. It directly hits the price you pay for gas and could seriously shake up the entire world economy. And here it is. This is the place we're talking about, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, look at it. At its skinniest point, it's just 40 kilometers across. That's it. It separates Iran from Oman, and because of that, it's pretty much always in the geopolitical crosshairs. Seriously, the best way to think about this place is as the world's main energy artery. It's the pipeline, the lifeblood, that keeps the global industrial machine running. And this is where you really see how much risk is concentrated in one spot. You've got massive energy exporters. We're talking Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait. All of them rely on this one single vulnerable route. So if that artery gets clogged even for a little while, well, their economies and, frankly, all the countries that rely on their oil are in a world of hurt. So who controls the northern side of this choke point? That would be Iran. And they have a very, very specific playbook for how to use this geography to their advantage. It's a textbook case of what's called an asymmetric strategy. And that brings us to the big question, right? The one Iran's military planners have been wrestling with for decades. How can a, weaker military force go up against a global superpower? How do you even begin to challenge a navy that has giant aircraft carriers and just overwhelming firepower? Well, the answer is you don't fight them head on. You turn their biggest strengths into their biggest weaknesses. There's a fancy military term for this: anti-access/area denial, or A2/AD for short. But let's break it down. All it really means is you're making a specific area so dangerous, so costly for your enemy to enter that they just don't. You're not trying to sink their whole fleet in a big battle. You're just trying to make them look at the situation and say, you know what, this just isn't worth it. And Iran's version of A2/AD is pretty clever. It's this mix of advanced technology, like missiles, with old-school guerrilla tactics. They use every inch of their home turf advantage, all the little islands, the jagged coastline, the shallow waters, to create what experts call a literal trap. A trap, right? So how exactly does this trap work? Well, it's not just one thing. It's built with 3 different overlapping layers of defense that are all designed to work together. Okay, let's walk through it. First, you've got sea mines. Their job is to cause chaos, to disrupt shipping and force enemy vessels into pre-planned kill zones. Once they're there, boom, Layer 2 kicks in, a barrage of anti-ship missiles coming from all different directions. And finally, you've got Layer 3, an air defense system trying to protect all those missile launchers and mine layers from being taken out. So let's dig into each of these layers. Now, this whole threat of using mines, it's not just some theoretical plan. It's happened before. We have to go back to the so-called tanker war in 1987. U.S. forces were out there escorting oil tankers, and suddenly they get this really bizarre report over the radio. So a U.S. Army helicopter pilot is looking at this Iranian ship, the Iran Ajar, through his night vision goggles. And he gets on the radio and says the crew is pushing, and get this, shopping carts over the side. I mean, shopping carts? It sounds completely nuts, but the implication was absolutely chilling. And sure enough, back on the American command ship, the Navy's mine expert, a guy named Lieutenant Mark Helmkamp, hears this and immediately knows what's happening. He confirms their worst fears. Sir, I think they're laying mines. And just like that, the situation exploded, proving just how fast this place can go from a shipping lane to a battlefield. So that incident back in '87 was a serious wake-up call. Fast forward to today, and the threat is even bigger. It's estimated that Iran now has an arsenal of something like 6,000 naval mines. And what's really key here is not just the number, but the variety. We're talking everything from old-school mines that have to be physically touched to detonate, all the way to super sophisticated modern ones. But the really scary part? It's how they can be deployed. Sure, from regular Navy ships, but also secretly from submarines, or even hidden on what looks like a totally normal civilian boat. That makes finding them an absolute nightmare. All right, so that's Layer 1. Layer 2 of this trap is a whole network of anti-ship missiles. And again, it's all about deception. They can fire these things from everywhere, from hidden batteries along the coast, from swarms of little fast attack boats, and this is the really tough one, from mobile trucks that can hide deep inland and then just drive to the coast, fire, and disappear. It's a pop-up threat that's incredibly difficult to stop. And that brings us to the third and final layer, air defense. Now, this one's kind of a mixed bag. The strength? It's a real patchwork of different systems, from old Western stuff to modern Russian gear. That variety makes it a credible threat. It's enough to make any attacker think twice. But here's the weakness. All those different systems don't really talk to each other very well. They're not integrated. And honestly, there just aren't enough of them to properly defend a country as huge as Iran. So we've talked about the hardware, the mines, the missiles. But this fight isn't just about weapons. It's also a battle of words, a war of laws, being fought in the arena of international law over conflicting interpretations. There's a term for this, lawfare. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It just means using legal arguments and the legal system itself as another weapon in a conflict. It's about tying your enemy's hands with rules while justifying your own actions. And here's the core of the legal fight. On one side, you have most of the world, which follows the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. It says everyone has a right of transit passage through international straits, and that right can't be taken away, period. But then you have Iran's side. They never actually ratified that treaty, so they argue for a much more limited right called innocent passage, which they say they can shut down if they feel their national security is threatened. And that is a massive, dangerous disagreement. So let's put it all together. You've got the military threat, you've got these massive economic stakes, and you've got this huge legal fight. What you end up with is an incredibly fragile, incredibly tense standoff. And because of that, the most likely threat here isn't some dramatic, full-scale blockade where Iran closes the strait completely. It's something more subtle, a strategy of partial disruption. We're talking about harassing tankers, maybe laying a few mines secretly, messing with GPS signals. It's all about operating in that gray zone, just below the level of an act of war. The goal isn't to start a fight. It's to make shipping more expensive, create delays, and inject just enough chaos to send global oil prices through the roof. And that really leaves us with one big final question, doesn't it? Because the Strait of Hormuz is really just a smaller version of a much bigger global problem. In a world where these vital choke points can be turned into weapons, and where the rules of international law are constantly being challenged, who exactly is supposed to guarantee the free flow of everything we all rely on?